Hey plant lovers, welcome back. Here's a claim that's going to sound wrong at first. The plant on your shelf that keeps stalling, keeps yellowing, keeps looking tired no matter what you do, there's a very good chance the problem isn't above the soil at all. It's not the light. It's not the leaves. It's the few inches of brown stuff you almost never think about sitting in the dark under the plant where you can't see it. And once you understand what's actually happening down there, almost everything else about plant care suddenly makes sense. I want to share something I learned the slow, painful way, by killing a lot of plants. For years, I treated soil like packing material. It was just the thing that held the plant upright. Water went on top, the plant pulled it up. That was the whole story in my head. I was completely wrong. The soil isn't a holder, it's a living system, and a fragile one. And almost every common houseplant problem traces back to something going wrong inside it. So in this video, I researched what experienced growers actually understand about that hidden zone, the soil itself, the roots inside it, how to water it, and when to cut your plant back. The 4 things that quietly decide whether your plant thrives or just survives. Let's start with the thing nobody tells you when you buy your first plant. Indoor plant soil isn't soil. Not in the way you're picturing. What you dig out of a garden is alive, full of worms, fungi, bacteria, insects, all of them constantly moving through it, breaking it up, opening tiny channels for air. What goes in a pot is something else entirely. It's a manufactured potting mix designed to be light, sterile, and stable in a container. And that difference is the root of nearly everything. Because here's what most people don't know. Out in a garden, soil aerates itself. Researchers at Oregon State University's horticulture program describe the underground world as one giant aeration engine. Worms and microorganisms tunneling endlessly, pulling air down to the roots without anyone lifting a finger. A potted plant has none of that. You've taken a tropical plant, dropped it in a plastic tube of nearly dead mix, and removed every single creature that would normally keep the soil breathing. So that job, the worm's job, falls to you. Think about that for a second. When you brought that plant home, you didn't just sign up to water it. You signed up to be its earthworm. And this matters more than almost anyone realizes, because of one fact that gets buried under all the talk about watering and light. Roots need to breathe. Not metaphorically, literally. We all learn about photosynthesis in school, leaves turning light into sugar, and then we stop the lesson right there. But there's a second process happening at the other end of the plant, down in the dark, called respiration. The roots take that sugar and burn it for energy, and to burn it, they need oxygen, the same way you do. No oxygen at the roots means no energy. No energy means no growth. It's that simple. So where do the roots get their oxygen? From tiny air pockets in the soil. That's it. That's the whole supply. Which means the single most important property of your potting mix isn't how much water it holds. It's how well it holds air. And this completely reframes the problem most beginners are wrestling with. A plant suffering from low oxygen at the roots looks almost exactly like a plant that's thirsty. Slow growth, yellowing, faded color, drooping. So you do the natural thing. You water it. And you've just made it worse, because now the air pockets are full of water and the roots are suffocating even harder. Before I go further, do me one favor. If you've ever watered a sad plant and watched it get sadder, this video is going to explain why. So subscribe before you forget, because the watering section later on is the part that fixed this for me completely. And I don't want you to miss it. Now, let's talk about what's actually in that bag you bought. A decent indoor mix is a balance of 3 jobs. Something to hold water, usually coconut coir or peat moss. Something to hold air, usually perlite, those little white volcanic balls. And sometimes a bit of bark or charcoal for structure. The whole point is a mix that holds enough moisture for the plant to sip through the week, but stays open and airy enough that the roots never drown. And here's the trap. Most off-the-shelf mixes lean the wrong way. They hold too much water and not enough air, especially indoors, where there's no wind and water evaporates far slower than it does outside. Here's where it gets interesting, and where I made one of my worst mistakes for years. I used to buy whatever big bag said all-purpose on the front. It felt efficient. One bag, every plant. But that mix is built for outdoor life. Flower beds, vegetable patches, hanging baskets, places with sun and wind and worms and real drainage. Indoors, in a small pot with still air, that same mix behaves like a wet sponge left in a sink. Heavy, dense, and once it's wet, it stays wet. Your roots end up trapped in cold, airless mud, and you stand there wondering why nothing's growing. The second mistake is using one mix for everything, which is like cooking one dinner for a household where one person is allergic to half of it. A snake plant or a cactus wants water in and out, fast. They store moisture in their leaves and hate sitting wet. A monstera or philodendron wants a chunky, open mix full of air gaps so its thick roots can stretch and climb. A calathea or fern wants something finer that stays evenly damp without ever turning swampy. One generic blend across all of them guarantees that somebody at the party is miserable. And the fussy ones will tell you, loudly, with brown, crispy edges. Now I want to show you a hidden saboteur, because this one fooled me for an embarrassingly long time. It's called hydrophobic soil, and the science behind it is genuinely fascinating. The University of California's Master Gardener program in Santa Clara County has a clear write-up on it, and here's the short version. Peat moss, the base of most bagged mixes, is prized because it holds water beautifully. But it has a paradox built in. When peat dries out completely, it flips and starts repelling water instead. Under a microscope, you can see why. The fibers are tiny tubes, and when they dry, trapped air inside creates a kind of internal pressure that physically pushes incoming water back out. So picture what happens. Your plant's soil dries all the way out. You water it. The water hits that dry peat, can't soak in, and instead runs down the gap between the soil and the pot wall, straight out the drainage hole. You see water coming out the bottom and think, great, it's soaked through. It isn't. The center of the root ball is bone dry while water pours out around the edges. You've essentially watered the gap, not the plant. This is one of the most common reasons a plant slowly dehydrates in soil that looks like it's being watered just fine. And here's the fix. Straight from the extension folks. Don't water from the top when soil's gone fully hydrophobic. Submerge the whole pot in a bucket of room temperature water and let it sit for 15-20 minutes until the air bubbles stop rising. That forces water in from every side and fully rehydrates the core. This is also, quietly, why a lot of people end up with fungus gnats and never figure out where they came from. A heavy, waterlogged mix that stays damp at the surface is a perfect nursery for them. The bag looked clean, the soil looked fine, but a mix that holds too much moisture at the top is basically rolling out a welcome mat. Lighter, airier soil that dries out on top between waterings makes the whole environment far less inviting to them. So what do experienced growers actually do? They stop buying soil as a finished product and start building it around the plant. And it's not complicated. For most houseplants, a reliable all-rounder is roughly 5 parts coconut coir, 2 parts perlite, and an optional 1 part horticultural charcoal. I lean on coir over peat now for a simple reason. Coir re-wets easily when it dries, while peat fights you. That coir holds the moisture, the perlite keeps the whole thing open and full of air, and the charcoal helps keep it fresh. For the chunky root crowd, monsteras, philodendrons, hoyas, throw in a few handfuls of orchid bark to open it up even more. For the thirsty, moisture-loving plants like ferns and calatheas, swap in a couple parts of vermiculite, which holds water but releases it slowly, like a slow drip feeder buried in the mix. And 2 things outside the soil quietly change the equation. The pot is one. A terracotta pot is porous. It wicks moisture out through its walls and dries fast. A plastic pot, holds water far longer. So the very same plant in those two pots needs slightly different soil. Put a thirsty plant in terracotta, and I'll cut back on the drainage material. Put it in plastic, and I'll open the mix up more. Your room is the other factor. A plant near a sunny window or a heating vent dries out far faster than one in a shady corner. There is no single perfect recipe. There's only the recipe that fits your plant, your pot, and your home. Adjusting for that is the whole game. All right, that's the soil. Now let's go one layer deeper into the roots living inside it, because there's a slow-motion disaster that builds up in almost every pot, and most people don't catch it until it's far along. It's called being root-bound. Here's the strange thing about it. You can't see it. The plant looks fine from above, right up until it doesn't. What's happening is that the roots have filled the entire pot, circling the walls, packing tighter and tighter until there's almost no soil left, just a dense, solid mass of root. And I think of it in 3 levels, which makes it much easier to know when to act. At level 1, there's still plenty of soil, the roots aren't circling much, and the plant's happy where it is. Just keep an eye on it. At level 2, you'll see roots starting to swirl around the bottom in a tight ring, maybe poking out the drainage holes. And that's your signal to size it up soon. Level 3 is the one you want to avoid. The soil is essentially gone, replaced by a brick of tangled root, and the plant has been quietly suffering for months. Why does it matter so much? Because the plant depends on that soil to do everything. Hold water, hold air, hold nutrients. When the soil disappears and it's all roots, there's nothing left to hold on to water, so the pot dries out almost the moment you water it. And there's nothing left to hold nutrients, which is the main reason a root-bound plant yellows and simply stops growing. So watch for the tells. The first is usually fast drying. If a plant suddenly needs water twice as often as it used to, roots are taking over. Then comes stalled growth and yellowing. And here's an odd one most people miss. If your plant looks like it's slowly rising up out of its pot, climbing on its tiptoes, that's the roots underneath, grown so dense they're literally pushing the whole plant upward. When you see that, it's well past time. If you're finding this useful, here's a real reason to drop a comment below. Tell me which of your plants you suspect is root-bound right now. I read them, and it genuinely helps me figure out which plant deserves its own full video next. So let's repot it the right way, because there are 2 steps in here where people accidentally kill the plant. First, get it out of the pot, ideally when the soil's a little dry so it isn't a muddy mess. For a stubborn one, squeeze and massage the sides of the pot, or run a clean knife around the inside edge. Grip the plant low at the base so you're pulling on the strong part and not tearing off stems. Then, gently loosen the roots. If it's mildly root-bound, just tease the bottom apart enough to stop them circling. If it's a solid level 3 brick, you can take a sharp, clean knife and slice off the bottom inch or so of matted root. I know that sounds violent. It won't kill the plant. It actually encourages fresh roots to branch out into the new soil. I've done it to plenty of plants, and they bounced back fine. Now here's the first place people go wrong. When you set the plant into its new pot, the soil line has to land exactly where it was before. Put a layer of fresh mix at the bottom, set the plant on top, and check the depth. Going a little higher is fine. Going deeper is dangerous. Bury the stem or crown, and you risk rotting it, which can kill the whole plant. When it's anchored, backfill around the sides, and give the pot a few firm taps on the table to settle the mix into any air pockets around the roots. Leave a little gap between the soil and the rim so water doesn't overflow every time you pour. And here's the second mistake, the one that surprises people. Water it thoroughly right after repotting, even if you watered it yesterday. This isn't really about the plant being thirsty. Watering settles the mix tight around the roots and collapses the hidden air gaps that otherwise leave roots dangling in nothing. After it drains, you'll often see little sinkholes appear where pockets filled in. Top them up with a bit more mix. One quick note on timing, because the old advice is wrong. You don't have to repot only in spring. As long as your home isn't freezing, roots grow year-round. And I've repotted plants in the dead of winter with no trouble at all. That brings us to the third thing, watering. And I want to clear up the single biggest fear in all of houseplant care, because getting this one idea right changed everything for me. The fear is overwatering. People are terrified of it. And the misunderstanding underneath that fear is this. They think overwatering means giving too much water at once. It doesn't. When you water, you should water thoroughly. Soak the whole root ball until water runs freely out the bottom. A deep, complete drink is exactly what the plant wants. It wets every part of the soil evenly and flushes out built-up mineral salts. You cannot harm a plant by giving it a generous drink in a single watering. So if quantity isn't the danger, what is? Frequency. Overwatering is watering too often, keeping the soil constantly wet, never letting it dry, so the roots never get a breath of air between drinks. And notice, this loops straight back to where we started. It's not the water that does the damage. Plants can grow in pure water. That's all hydroponics is. The damage comes from the lack of oxygen. Soil that stays soaked has no air pockets left. The roots suffocate, and they turn black and mushy and die. There's a name for that airless, waterlogged state, anaerobic soil, and you can often smell it, a sour, swampy odor when you tip the pot out. That smell is the sound of roots drowning. So the entire skill of watering comes down to one rule, and I'll say it the way I say it in every video until you can hear it in your sleep. Water when the soil is dry. Not on a schedule, not on a calendar. When it's actually dry. How do you know when it's dry? You can poke a finger in, but I find fingers unreliable past the top inch. A wooden chopstick or skewer works. Push it in, pull it out, and if it comes out clean and dry, it's time. But the tool I genuinely put in every plant owner's hands is a cheap moisture meter, the kind that costs under $10 at Home Depot or any garden center. Stick the probe down near the roots and only water when it reads dry. No more guessing, no more 2 a.m. worrying about whether you've drowned something. That single rule covers almost every common houseplant. Pothos, monstera, ficus, philodendron, even succulents. And yes, even calatheas, despite their reputation for loving moisture. They like steady moisture, sure, but they hate sitting wet far more. Let the soil approach dry, then water. One more watering trap because it ties everything together. None of this works without drainage. Free-draining soil is just soil with enough air pockets that excess water flows straight out the bottom instead of pooling. And the pot has to have a drainage hole, no exceptions. A gorgeous pot with no hole is a death sentence unless you're a true watering expert, because water with nowhere to go sits in the bottom and rots the roots from below. If your soil seems to take forever to dry no matter what, you've got two fixes. Switch to a better, airier mix, or move to terracotta, whose porous walls pull moisture out from every side and dry the whole thing far faster. And here's a small habit that prevents a slow death. Even good soil compacts over time. Bark breaks down, coir packs tight, perlite drifts to the top, and your lovely airy mix slowly turns into something dense that won't hold air properly. So every so often, poke a chopstick down into the soil in a few spots and gently wiggle it to open up channels. Penn State Extension's horticulture guidance treats this kind of periodic aeration as a real maintenance step, not a gimmick. It restores the oxygen exchange that compaction strangles. Don't worry about nicking a few roots. They recover. And if you can, water from the bottom sometimes. Set the pot in a tray of water and let it wick up. Because the water isn't pounding down from above, the soil compacts less, and the moisture spreads evenly through the whole root ball with no dry pockets left behind. Now for the fourth thing, the one that feels the most counterintuitive of all. If you never prune your plants, they'll never truly thrive. I resisted this for years. You pour all this effort into getting a plant to grow, and the advice is to cut it off? It felt like sabotage. But here's the part nobody explains. Plants expect to be pruned. In the wild, stems get chewed by animals, snapped by wind, broken by weather. That constant damage is exactly what triggers them to branch out and push strong new growth. Indoors, nothing ever bothers them, so they just stretch, taller, leggier, more tired-looking, reaching for a fight that never comes. When you prune, you're not hurting the plant. You're giving it that fight. Every cut sends a hormonal signal to wake up dormant buds, and the new shoots that come back are almost always fuller and stronger than the tired stem you removed. The key is knowing where to cut, and it comes down to one feature: the node. The node is the slightly raised line or bump on the stem where leaves emerge. It's also where new growth and new roots originate, so it's the magic spot. To prune a stemmed plant, you make your cut just above a node. Above it, not into it. Cut too low and you damage the node below. Cut too high and you leave an ugly, dead stub. Right above a node, clean cut, done. The plant takes the energy it was pouring into that one tall stem and redirects it, often into several new stems lower down. One stem becomes a bush. There are basically 3 depths of pruning to know. A light prune is just pinching off the growing tips, an inch or two, to encourage bushiness, great for trailing plants. A shaping prune takes back the longer stems to even out a lopsided plant. And a hard prune cuts the whole thing way back to reset a leggy mess completely. That last one feels brutal, but most houseplants handle losing around 1/3 of themselves in one go without flinching, as long as you leave some healthy growth behind. And here's a reassurance worth holding on to. Plants don't only photosynthesize through their leaves. Their green stems do it too. So you can cut a plant back hard, almost to a bare stub, and it'll often surprise you by pushing right back. They are far more resilient than they look. And the bonus that makes pruning addictive? Almost nothing you cut off has to go in the trash. Most stemmed cuttings, taken with a node on them, will root in a glass of water in a few weeks. Once you see roots, pot it into soil, and you've got a brand new, free plant. So every haircut your plant gets is also a chance to make another one. 2 plants for the price of a single cut. A few quick cautions, because timing matters. Don't prune a plant that's badly dehydrated and limp. Let it recover first. Pruning is a stress it doesn't need on top of drought stress. Don't prune in the middle of an active pest problem, because your tools can carry pests from stem to stem and spread it. And give a freshly repotted plant a few weeks to settle before you start cutting. Outside of those situations, prune freely and often. The old rule that you can only prune in spring is mostly a myth for indoor plants. With decent light, most of them keep growing year-round and take a trim in any season. There are a few genuine exceptions, like rubber plants, which truly do pause in winter. But for the vast majority, a good cut is welcome whenever you make it. So here's where all 4 pieces come together, and it's simpler than it sounds. The soil decides whether the roots can breathe. The roots, kept from choking themselves in a too tight pot, decide whether the plant can feed. The watering, done by dryness instead of by calendar, keeps that whole underground system supplied with both water and air. And the pruning sends the plant the signal to grow into all of it. Get those 4 working together, and you stop fighting your plants. You start working with them. None of it is hard. It just lives in the part of the plant you were never taught to look at. The few inches under the surface, in the dark, doing all the quiet work. Take care of your plants.